Coming up, bonehead thing, bone, whether they're over you or under you, or what. All right, I couldn't resist this one. It's been all over the news, and you'd have to be living under a rock to not have seen this viral moment from, I believe it was last Wednesday, from up in Massachusetts, with the curious case of Andy Byron and Kristin Cabot. If you haven't seen it, of course I'm going to show it to you because it's super cringeworthy. So let's check it out.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
You saw it, didn't you? I'm laughing at the absurdity of this and the stupidity of this. It is just epic leadership fail is the best way I can describe it. And we're going to break that down for you today. So we're going to look at why the video is a problem. Yes, it went viral, what the fallout is. And I'm also going to be talking about how it erodes both market and organizational trust when leaders in a company behave in a manner like this. And then I couldn't resist. I had to look back and see what other kind of salacious corporate scandals there were, and we're going to be looking at those as well, so stick around. So what's been the fallout? First of all, I feel totally bad for Andy Byron's wife. She decided she was going to take her married name off of her Facebook account, but I think that lasted for a minute before she just took the whole thing down. Andy Byron took down his LinkedIn profile because this went super viral. I can only imagine that, after this happened, they ran for cover and all the things, and they heard from Chris Martin from stage saying either they're having an affair or they are just really shy people. Obviously, the former was the truth. The fallout has been epic, and the internet came for these folks, and came for their families, because I'm sure both Kristin and Andy's families are just getting hounded at this point. Then to make matters worse, the internet wasn't helpful, and somebody put out a fake apology, and quite frankly, I fell for it, right? I've seen these apologies before. I've worked with internal communications when things like this have happened, and all of that sounded right. The company didn't actually release a statement. So this happened Wednesday. The company didn't respond until Saturday. And I'm sure while that length of time was probably not the best idea, I'm sure they were scrambling to figure out what the damage control could be and how they could actually survive this and get around it, and had no idea that with every minute that passed, this went more viral, and the damage became more and more real and tangible in that moment. So finally on Saturday, the news hit that both Andy Byron and Kristin Cabot from HR, and again, he's a CEO and she's the HR person, and we will get into that in just a minute, so stick around. But they were both placed on leave pending an internal investigation. The irony being is that her department would be responsible for investigations of this matter and recommending a course of action to remedy the situation. So here we are, the top HR person is now doing something, is culpable of something, allegedly, we'll say that. Okay. Allegedly culpable of something that her department would investigate and seek a remedy for. So that is a ginormous problem. I don't know, and I couldn't find who actually did the investigation. Normally in these situations, which are thankfully few and far between, you might engage an outside firm to do some type of investigation. They didn't have time to do that. So all I can think of is that the board of directors actually conducted the investigation. And then all the while going on behind the scenes, Andy's working on, an exit package, right? Because of course his probably contract as the CEO provided for some sort of payment upon his departure. So he's negotiating that, right? And I know what you're thinking, Rob, that is not right. He did wrong. He should pay. He shouldn't get any money. I don't disagree with you. I'm just, again, don't shoot the messenger. I am just stating what normally happens. Lots of people get paid to go away because it makes the problem go away faster. And in this case, his resignation came either on Saturday or Sunday. At least that's when it hit the media. Now, as of this morning, Kristin Cabot is still on Astronomer's website listed as their chief HR person. Now, there's a few things to unpack here, right? First of all, I saw some comments in my feed when I teased this episode the other day, and somebody's like, hey, why is Andy, why is the CEO put on blast? Why isn't she put on blast too? I don't disagree with you. I always think there's a double standard, but I think we have to look back at history, right? Because it's usually, and this is the case here, it's the person in power that is the one that's usually the offender here, right? So that's why he's getting put a little bit more on blast, right? Did she know what she was doing? Probably. I don't think she's still married. I don't know. I've seen conflicting reports. I'm only as good as what Google tells me. But here's the thing. It's immaterial if she's still married or not. He couldn't have told her that, I'm divorced now. No, she knows. She has access to his records. She knows that his wife is still there. They're still legally married. So she absolutely had to have known what she was getting herself into. And by the way, she's not been there very long. She's only been there since fall of 2024. So I'm wondering, he brought her on, he praised her with all these accolades and a warm statement when she came on board. And how long has this been going on is my question. And how many people knew about it, right? Because these things are typically the worst kept secrets. I'll tell you a quick story too, quickly. One of the jobs I held, and again, I'm not going to give away which company this was that I worked at when this went down. There was wild speculation that a senior HR executive, like at the senior vice president level, was having an affair with super senior executive on the business side. I think he was an SVP as well. Her client, if you will, like they were actually having sex in a car in the parking garage. This was circulating the whole building. It was kind of the worst kept secret. I don't even know if it was true, but it also damaged their reputations, right? Because, not gonna lie, if you look at the timeline, that rumor happened. Suddenly these people fell from favor or sought different opportunities outside the organization. Now, we all know what that is code for. You're fired. Another example, and this is, again, I referred to this in one of my other videos the other day, but it bears repeating because it's so absurd. So you have a senior vice president, and I think, just an aside, I think power goes to people's head, right? They feel like I've achieved this great job, and now I'm almost untouchable. Maybe they don't think that out loud, but that's kind of how they show up. And this individual, senior vice president of human resources, was having an affair with his business client's administrative assistant on the desk in his office. Yeah. And I remember it as if it happened yesterday. And first, it was the organizational update email from our chief HR person. It said, announcement, and it gave the person's name. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. So sure enough, so-and-so has decided to seek opportunities outside the organization. We wish him well, blah, blah, blah. What a dumbass. The fall from grace is epic and catastrophic and quick. So those are two just from my experience. And again, stick around. We're going to be talking about some other ones that made the news that do not disappoint. But let's get back to the curious case of Andy and Kristin from Astronomer. And I love my book, The Speed of Trust. I need to have a prop here on my desk with it. Maybe that's to come. Speed of Trust, people, if you're listening, you can send me a book and other goodies. Anyway, I say that tongue in cheek because I absolutely love it. I find such value in it. But their behavior erodes, destroys, obliterates organizational trust, right? These two especially should be set as a standard for how the company operates. They should be the living embodiment of the company's culture, the company's values. That's going to put more weight, more gravitas to, hey, this is actually who we are, and these are our values, and we live them every day. They're not just words in a frame on a wall, which we've seen those before, and we're like, hey, see these values over here, you're not behaving that way. So there's a disconnect. They are the standard bearers in this equation, Andy and Kristin. And Astronomer, just a little bit about that company. They were called, and I never heard this term until recently, a unicorn company, where they just blew up overnight. And I think it was 2022 when this guy became the CEO, and they became $1 billion company overnight. Now, with this behavior, and again, we're going to talk about it in a second about market trust, they've really taken themselves back decades in their relationships with their clients, right? They're going to have to make up a lot of ground. This new interim CEO, I think his name is Jay, has a lot of ground to make up. And that started Saturday with the resignation announcement of Andy. They couldn't start moving forward until that was taken care of. The other thing I find hilarious in this equation is that I read in one of the articles somewhere that employees at Astronomer were told not to discuss this incident. Really? Who's going to police that? Kristin? No. So why is this a problem other than, just they just did a bonehead thing. Bone. It brings up issues and raises questions about integrity, favoritism, objectivity. They can't then hold people accountable without having a ton of hypocrisy on their face. We know people get fired for this type of stuff all the time. That's why if you hear nothing from me from this video, if you take nothing else away, remember, don't date somebody in the company. If you do, make sure they're in a different department and a whole different ecosystem from you. No good will come from dating, canoodling, whatever it is, with somebody from your own department, especially somebody who reports to you, because it's all fun and games until it's not, until something goes wrong and that person, usually the one in the subordinate role to you, says, you know what? I feel like I've been wrong. And now all of this stuff we've been doing, even though I've said it's consensual, suddenly I'm going to change my tune and have a different narrative because you now piss me off. If you do find yourself madly in love with somebody that is, in your reporting structure, make sure, make some changes. If you guys are going to get married, make some changes. One of you transfer to a different part of the organization or a different company. It's not worth it. The negatives far outweigh the positives in this equation of you two continuing to work together. So when we talk about organizational trust, and I'm going to throw the definition of it up on the screen here, is organizational trust is essentially a belief that the organization and its leaders are reliable, honest, and care about the well-being of their employees. One could say that those things could be true and then their actions, they could be mutually exclusive from their actions. I want to believe that these were good leaders that just made a really bad choice. Like it or not, you could say, Rob, this was a private moment between two consenting adults. Okay, fair. But you're in a leadership role. The rules are different. You're always under a microscope. You're casting a long shadow, and people are going to scrutinize everything. This is why this is becoming such a problem. And I can only imagine what the employees are going through right now, right? They're worried that the whole company could go under. So I'm sure the new interim CEO is having to do a ton of damage control, all sorts of things going on to make sure that today they are starting to rebuild the trust of the organization. And we're going to get to market trust in a minute because this has a definite, a profound impact on their clients and their customers. Okay, so why do I keep talking about speed of trust and market trust? Let me talk to you about this right now. I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. Market trust is the level of confidence customers and stakeholders have in a company's products, services, and overall brand. It's about whether they believe the company is reliable, honest, and delivers on its promises. So now, knowing that, can you see how what Kristin and Andy did eroded that, right? So I'm sure they are fielding at Astronomer tons of phone calls, and we're talking top to top phone calls, right? Because they're a business to business provider, as best I understand it, and be reassured by the new leadership that, yes, you can still trust us. This is not going to change anything about our relationship with you. So Astronomers in that damage control phase where they're having to reassure clients. But if you think about market trust, right? If you think about the basic tenet, the core tenet of the speed of trust, when trust is high, speed is high and cost goes down. When trust is low, the speed is going down and then the cost is going to go up because they're now trying to make up ground for time lost or productivity lost, and that's costing money. So you can see quickly just in that basic breakdown, trust can be eroded just from one single point of failure, and that point of failure in this equation is an affair. All right, I'm putting HR on blast here because the credibility and the conflict of interest here is just staggering. Even a perception of impropriety. I mentioned that one rumor that was going around one of the places I worked about people, two executives canoodling in the car in the parking garage. I don't know if that was true. Again, leaders cast a long shadow. You have to realize everybody's watching you no matter how safe the environment is. And this goes for leaders at all levels. It is hyper focused on the ones at the top, but even, you're a supervisor or a manager or a director, the higher you go up the food chain, the more scrutiny is placed on you. So you have to really be thinking about, what is the buzz about me in an organization? What are people saying? And even if you think it's lip service or gossip, you can't just discount it as that and put it aside. You have to think about why people are saying that and how do I then change the narrative back. You can recover from some of that if it is just gossip or speculation or rumor, but you have to put some thought into it and be aware of it and not dismiss it. Okay, I promised you some other stories, and let's talk about a few. I've got 3. So first of all, and I worked at Boeing, and I did not remember hearing tale of this. So when I was doing some research for this video, and this one popped up as a number 1 on the list, I was kind of surprised. But it tells the tale of Harry Stonecipher at Boeing, and I think this is back in 2005, where he was having an affair with a woman named Deborah Peabody. And I'm not revealing any trade secrets. I found this on an article. The affair was the problem such that the board actually looked at this and said, hey, this is now being talked about. It's the worst kept secret in the organization. And we now feel that this affair is impairing Harry's ability to lead the organization effectively, because now the narrative of it has overtaken him as a leader. So unfortunately, this one bad thing he did, or actually I think it was an ongoing affair, so there's that, but it overshadowed all the good he could do. He may have been a great leader. He may have had great results and all that type of stuff, but the narrative and the speculation and the perception of favoritism or other impropriety was overtaking who he was as a leader, and the board of directors had no other choice than to take action. When companies turn a blind eye to this, that has even more implications, right? Oh, nobody's complaining about this, so we're just going to turn a blind eye. Okay, well then try and hold other people accountable for that. And they're going to say, hey, you got some spinach on your teeth. You got some hypocrisy on your face. You can't authentically hold me accountable while you're turning a blind eye to this other person just because he happens to be the leader of the company. So Harry, unfortunately, was forced to resign in probably about 3 months, and then it prompted the board to actually conduct and enact a review of leadership conduct, and probably built all of that into contracts with future executives. All right, now we're going to talk about John Brown from BP, and I think this was back probably around the same time of Mr. Stonecipher at Boeing. It was around 2007, and he was a high-ranking executive, and he was a openly gay man, or is. I don't think he's gone, but he's an openly gay man, and that wasn't the issue at BP. That was widely known. It was fine, but he got caught up in lying about part of who he was, and that was how he met his husband. And I think this was before the days of Grindr or whatever it is, right? But he met his husband on a male escort site. So apparently he paid for it. Then they found out they had a connection, went to live happily ever after, and he lied about it. he got caught in the lie. So, it goes back to kind of the Watergate, right, scenario where the cover up is worse than the crime. And unfortunately, his honesty just permeated every decision. It eroded trust both internally and externally till the board or the leadership above him had no other choice but to take action. And then the last one, if you have not seen the Netflix show Trainwreck, I highly recommend it. And they obviously look at different train wrecks, one of which was the story of Dove Charney at American Apparel. I never shopped there. I owned it. I was too old to shop there, and frankly, none of it really appealed to me. But watching this is mind-blowing. It's a story of epic arrogance, epic sexual harassment. I mean, there's one scene on tape, on video, where he is absolutely 100% naked in front of his staff, in front of the people that work closely to him. I think he was trying on underwear. I believe there was some shaking about. It was cringeworthy. Go check it out. Again, Netflix, Trainwreck. It's worthy of it. But here's the thing. He refused to back down and change his behavior, and it resulted in multiple legal issues and repeated lawsuits, and it just kept going and going. And they were on this growth trajectory, and he thought, I'm untouchable. You can't come for me. I have all this power. And it all went to his head to the point where he was naked in front of people and thought, hey, who does that sound like? You could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. I think the parallels are clear. There was one other situation that he was in where he was actually masturbating in public.
What?
Again, he thought he was untouchable. And then the company went into severe freefall when the inability of the board to hold him accountable became part of the story. So all of a sudden, sales started tanking with the repeated lawsuits. And then that was all that was in the narrative, not the great employees that were working their knuckles to the bone to keep this company afloat, despite its leader. All right, so let's recap the stories we've heard today. So first of all, going back to Harry Stonecipher, his consensual relationship still cost him his job due to a conflict of interest, concerns, and hypocrisy. If we think about John Brown from BP, he tried to hide his personal life through dishonesty in court. It's the lie, not the life, that sank his reputation. Dove Charney, a legacy of repeated misconduct allegations, damaged the company culture and ultimately forced him out. And then Byron and Cabot, right, at Astronomer, a modern case where social media exposure accelerated reputational and internal consequences. So what are the common threads here, right? What do we see throughout all of this? And again, this is not just limited to the CEO or the uppermost echelon of the company. This can happen at any level of leadership, right? You've got power imbalances. You've got epically poor judgment. You've got that blurred personal and professional lines. And then the ripple effect hits morale, the brand, and the business. So why did this matter? You're like, oh, Rob, this doesn't affect me. I'm so far down in the organization. This stuff doesn't affect me. Well, it could affect you. And why? Because suddenly, let's just take the case of American Apparel. Maybe those people who were actually, making the clothing or working in distribution or in retail, right? They were doing a great job. But then all of a sudden they found themselves out of a job because of the conduct of their leaders. So even if you think, hey, that doesn't affect me, that's just a good news story, it does affect you. It erodes trust. It crosses lines. The fallout includes employee cynicism, PR disasters, investor unease, and in some cases, again, the total collapse of the company. So it does affect every level of the organization, both internally and then externally to its key stakeholders, with respect to their business. And I'm not here to shame anybody, right? Everybody's got a skeleton or two in their closet, right? But these stories are about understanding what the stakes are for these leaders and to everyone else in the organization. So if you find yourself climbing that corporate ladder and getting those jobs that you really aspire to, great. I wish all the success for you. But make sure you're aware of who's watching and make sure, as maybe unfair as it is, that your behavior, whether in work or outside of work, it's always under a microscope. Somebody's always watching, especially in this day of viral moments on social media. So here's some things to consider as, I kind of wrap up this video, right? So first of all, if leadership isn't modeling boundaries, how can you expect anybody else to uphold them? These events lead to cultural shakeups, policy changes, and talent exits. These could be, Andy and Kristin are probably really accomplished professionals, and this one moment or ongoing moment, or whatever it is, of indiscretion has cost them their jobs and is probably going to have a negative impact on that business. And it probably has employees at every level of that organization thinking to themselves, is this a healthy culture? And I did read one article that said, that people were actually saying that Astronomer did have a bad culture. It was a bit of a toxic culture. I don't know how true that is, given that it could come from former employees that were, terminated, that are disgruntled. You never know. But this now reinforces the fact that if they did have somewhat of a toxic culture before, this could just pile on effect, right? So again, that new CEO has got an uphill battle on his hands and a lot of ground to make up to get back to a point of being a trustworthy organization. And here's one kind of parting thought. Every leader should ask, what does my behavior signal to my team, even when I think no one's watching? And at the end of the day, a strong response protects not just the company's image internally and externally, but every employee who needs to trust it. And that's the thing. How do you maintain that trust? And if I were the new CEO, I'd be thinking about, okay, how do I rebuild the trust after I've lost it? Now, the new CEO did not lose it, but the keys part of the leadership. So in effect, he has lost the trust of his employees. How does he rebuild that? And the first thing he's doing, he's taking accountability. I think I saw a statement about that. These are not our values, all that type of stuff. So then he's got to signal to his staff or to the rest of the organization, what am I going to do to rebuild it? And once he signals to them what he's going to do, then he needs to follow up and do it. And then over time, once he keeps repeating that process, suddenly this will kind of fade into just the talk of, hey, remember back in the day, and the fact that that has been handled and is in the past will now just be kind of a footnote, hopefully, for this organization. I hope we all learn a lesson. It's not just the shock and the cringe of all this, all the media attention around the story of Andy and Kristin at Astronomer. I hope we can look at this and say, hey, as a leader, this is why I have to behave a certain way. This is why maybe I can't go out drinking with the team to the point of excess, all those types of things. So really think about what you can learn from what happened here and apply it to, again, any leadership level you're at in an organization. Again, the higher up you go in the organization, the longer the shadow you cast and the more scrutiny you will have on you. So again, my name's Rob, and I hope you've enjoyed this story time about Kristin and Andy and the other stories we've talked about. And if you like this content, I would absolutely be honored if you would like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. And please tell me some stories and below what you've experienced in the workplace or heard tale of. I love a good story. I just when I think I've heard everything, somebody hits me up with a comment. So please comment below. And then also, you're going to keep hearing me talk about the Speed of Trust. I absolutely love this book. It's super. You can cherry pick stuff out of it. Like I mentioned before, just one side note, how do you rebuild trust with a team when you've lost it? There's a whole chapter in there dedicated to that. And it's a roadmap to getting yourself from a low trust environment back to a high trust environment. So again, check it out. It's a great read. Until next time, I hope each of you are well. I hope things are going well at work in a crazy job market out there. And let me know how you're doing. And until next time, take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.